How good is Dear White People on Netflix? I love it, and I can't believe I've only recently come across it. For anyone who doesn't know the show, I highly recommend it. Dear White People on Netflix. The other day I was watching the episode where the black character Reggie gets caught up in a fight at a student party and ends up staring down the barrel of this officer's gun. And you get a really good insight in terms of what that experience is like for a black person. You get to understand how the character feels in that moment and afterwards, and how traumatizing an experience it is. It's really heartbreaking to see him cry on his own afterwards, and you get a sense for his pain and how vulnerable and hurt and angry and humiliated he feels, and how frustrated that nowadays that sort of experience is still happening so often, and that it just happened to him. And it's really helped me understand a bit better what it means to go through life as a black person. And whilst I couldn't possibly say that I understand black people's pain, because I'm not black, I can say that I can relate to the pain, in the sense that as a woman and as the individual I am, who has had the experiences she has in her life, I can relate to the pain of not being seen, and the pain that comes from not being seen in your pain. Okay? And I want to say to the black community out there that I hear you, I see you. I'm sorry so many of us haven't done that before, and that right now, at least for my part, I'm trying to figure out how to best be an ally. And with regards to that, I asked myself the question, as an intersectional feminist, what do I expect from men for them to be a good ally? And have come up with 3 key things based on that. They're just really the basics, some fundamentals, but here they are. So number 1 that I expect from men is for them to acknowledge their male privilege. To acknowledge that because they're men, they don't need to walk through life constantly with their guard up, because they know that sexual harassment and worse, unfortunately, is a very common reality. That they don't need to worry about there being a ceiling at some point in their career. That they don't need to worry about their salaries being compromised purely based on their gender. So to acknowledge their male privilege, as well as to recognize that sexism is well alive, and that it's not just incidental or down to a few bad apples amongst men, but that it is a systemic issue. And that if they feel like those struggles don't relate to them, that's because the system is designed to have that effect. Number 2 is for men to recognize that just being a man that doesn't harass, or just being a man who isn't sexist, isn't enough. And that we need men to step up and actively be anti-sexist or feminist, really. It's about understanding that if you aren't part of the solution, you are part of the problem. And number 3, number 2 really inevitably leads to number 3. It's about taking action. And here the bare minimum I expect from men is for them to take an active interest in women's experiences, to educate themselves through reading, through listening to the women in their lives, and to then amplify women's voices in the conversations they have with other men and on social media, and to, call out sexism whenever they see and hear it, whether that's in the locker room or in the boardroom. and to be more attuned to it in themselves as well as in others. Because really, since Me Too, the latest, there's just no more excuse to keep looking away and to not get involved. So if I apply those 3 things to me as a white person, that means, number 1, I need to acknowledge my white privilege. I need to acknowledge that whilst I do belong to the group of people who unfortunately need to walk through life with their guard constantly up because we know that sexual harassment and worse is a common reality, that I'm still less likely to experience that sort of thing compared to black women in this world. That I don't need to worry about not getting a job because of my hair, etc. It's about understanding that racism, like sexism, is well alive, and that it's not just incidental or down to some crazy people, but that it's a systemic issue, and that if I feel like those struggles don't relate to me, that it's because the system is designed to have that effect. Number 2, it's about recognizing that just being not a racist is not enough. That the black community needs us white people to step up and be actively anti-racist. It's about understanding that if I'm not part of the solution, then I'm part of the problem. Which inevitably leads us to point number 3, taking action. So here the bare minimum that I will need to do is to educate myself through reading, through talking to the black people in my life. It's about learning about their experiences, and a show like Dear White People is great for that as well. It's about amplifying the voices of black people, whether that's in conversation with white people or on social media. It's about calling racism out when I hear and see it, whether that's on a Facebook wall or at work or with loved ones. And it's about being more attuned to it in myself as well as in others. Black Lives Matter is a call to action, and there's really no excuse anymore to keep looking away and not get involved. Like I said, that's just the bare minimum really, and I'm yet to learn a lot myself. There are lots of great resources out there as well in terms of how to be an ally and, in terms of educating ourselves as white people. I will post a link of a collection of resources under the video as well. And just one last thing. I know that a lot of black people currently are a bit cynical out there because they fear that a lot of white people will just jump on the bandwagon of Black Lives Matter right now, post a hashtag or 2, and will have forgotten about the matter the following week. And it's so important that as white people we keep pushing for change alongside black people until it really happens. I mean, if oppression happens off the back of our privilege, then we really have that ongoing responsibility. So let me know your thoughts on how to best be an ally. Comment on the video, like it if it was useful to you, share it, and subscribe to Conscious Nuggets if you haven't already. I'll see you next time at Conscious Nuggets.